The rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Cross Technology's 42nd floor, which dropped like a bullet against the glass. Nathan Cross stood with his back to his executive team, watching the storm consume Miami's skyline. At 38, he had built an empire from nothing, clawing his way from foster care to Forbes' billionaire list through sheer determination and ruthless business tactics. His reflection in the window showed a man carved from stone, expensive suit perfectly tailored. Dark hair swept back without a strand out of place. Double quotes, sir. We need your decision on the Riverside deal. His chief financial officer, pressed from behind the mahogany conference table, Nathan didn't turn around. The storm outside mirrored something restless in his chest, though he would never admit it. Push it through. I don't care about their concerns. 20 miles south? Victoria Chen pulled her beaten Honda into Memorial General Hospital's staff parking lot. Fighting against wind that threatened to tear her car door from its hinges, at 32, she had spent 8 years as the hospital's patient care coordinator. A job that paid barely enough to cover her student loans, but filled her heart in ways that money never could. Her black hair whipped around her face as she ran toward the entrance. Clutching a folder of emergency protocols she had been reviewing at home, Victoria had learned early that preparation could mean the difference between life and death. Growing up as the daughter of immigrants, she had watched her parents struggle through language barriers and financial hardship when her younger brother needed surgery. The hospital staff who had shown kindness during those dark days had inspired her career path. Now, every patient file that crossed her desk carried a face. A story, a family hoping for good news. Inside Memorial General, the fluorescent lights flickered ominously. The hurricane, initially predicted to veer east, had shifted course with devastating suddenness. Category 4 winds were now bearing down on Miami. And the hospital's aging infrastructure was already showing signs of strain. Victoria? Thank goodness you're here, called Dr. James Rodriguez, the emergency department chief. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of worry. We're looking at potential power failures. The backup generators haven't been tested in 6 months. Victoria's stomach dropped. She had been fighting the administration for generator maintenance for over a year. But budget cuts kept pushing the repairs to next quarter. Now, with over 200 patients in the building, including 37 in intensive care, that delay could prove catastrophic. What's our current status? She asked, already pulling up patient lists on her tablet. ICU has 18 patients on life support. Cardiac unit has 12 on monitors, and we've got 7 premature babies in NICU. Dr. Rodriguez rattled off the numbers like a prayer. If we lose main power for more than 20 minutes, people will die. Across the city, Nathan's phone buzzed with an emergency alert. His personal assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Mr. Cross, Memorial General Hospital is requesting emergency funding. Their backup systems are failing. Nathan paused his pacing. Memorial General was where Cross Technologies had been planning to install their new patient management system, a contract worth $12 million. But more than that, something about the hospital's name stirred a memory he kept buried deep. Tell them to submit a formal proposal, he said automatically, sir. They're saying it's life or death. The storm is overwhelming their systems. For a moment, Nathan's carefully constructed walls wavered. He remembered being 8 years old, lying in a hospital bed after his foster father's latest beating. Watching nurses work through the night to save a man in the next bed, he remembered promising himself that someday he would be powerful enough that no one could hurt him again. Get me. Dr. Rodriguez on the line, he said quietly at Memorial General. Victoria coordinated with maintenance crews as they struggled to restart the primary backup generator. Water had seeped into the electrical systems, and the secondary backup was showing dangerous power fluctuations. She moved through the halls like a general commanding troops, her clipboard thick with contingency plans she had developed in her spare time. Mrs. Patterson in room 314 needs manual ventilation if the power drops, she told Nurse Janet Williams. Mr. Garcia in cardiac has to stay on the monitor. His arrhythmia is critical. Victoria knew every patient by name, had visited with their families, understood their fears. To her, they weren't just medical cases. They were people trusting her to keep them safe. The phone in her makeshift command center rang. Victoria Chen, this is Nathan Cross from Cross Technologies. I understand you have an emergency situation. Victoria had heard of Nathan Cross, of course. The tech mogul was famous for his innovations and infamous for his ruthless business practices. She had read about companies he had crushed, employees he had fired without warning, communities his developments had displaced. But desperation made strange bedfellows. Mr. Cross, we need portable generators and backup power systems immediately. We have over 200 patients, many on life support. Our main systems are failing. I can have equipment there in 2 hours, Nathan said without hesitation. But I want something in return. Victoria's heart sank. Even in crisis, he was making deals. What do you want? I want to help personally. I'm coming to the hospital. The line went quiet. Victoria stared at her phone, certain she had misheard. I'm sorry, what? I'm flying in supplies and coming myself. See you in 2 hours. Before Victoria could respond, the line went dead. She stood holding the phone, wondering if the most ruthless businessman in Miami had just offered to help without demanding payment. Outside, Hurricane Rebecca roared toward the coast, carrying winds that would test more than just buildings and power lines. Sometimes the strongest storms reveal the true foundation of a person's character. Washing away everything superficial to expose what lies beneath, Nathan Cross gathered his emergency response team. His mind racing not with profit calculations, but with memories of vulnerability and pain. For the first time in 20 years, money felt insufficient. For the first time in his adult life, he was about to step into a situation where success couldn't be measured in dollars. Victoria returned to her rounds, updating families and preparing staff for the longest night of their careers. She didn't know if Nathan Cross would actually show up, or if this was another broken promise from someone with power. But she knew that regardless of outside help, she would stand between her patients and the storm until her last breath. The wind howled against Memorial General's windows, and somewhere in the distance, helicopter rotors began to cut through the rain. The storm was just beginning. So was a transformation that would change to lives forever. Thunder crashed overhead, as if the sky itself was announcing that some walls, no matter how carefully built, were about to come tumbling down. The helicopter landed on Memorial General's roof at exactly 11:47 p.m. Its rotors still spinning as Nathan Cross jumped out into the howling wind. He wore jeans and a simple black t-shirt, looking nothing like the billionaire who graced magazine covers. Behind him, his team unloaded portable generators, medical batteries, and emergency lighting systems worth more than most people's homes. Victoria met him at the roof access door, her scrubs soaked from running between floors, her hair escaping from what had once been a neat ponytail. She expected to see the cold, calculating businessman from newspaper photos. Instead, she found herself looking into eyes that held something she hadn't expected: genuine fear. Where do you need these? Nathan shouted over the storm. Gesturing to the equipment, Victoria led him down the emergency stairwell, their footsteps echoing against concrete walls. ICU first, then NICU, then cardiac. We lost main power 20 minutes ago. The backup is holding, but barely. As they reached the ICU, Nathan saw something that stopped him cold. In bed 7 lay an elderly man, probably in his 70s, connected to a ventilator. His weathered hands rested on a thin hospital blanket, and a young woman sat beside him, holding his fingers and whispering softly. The scene transported Nathan back 30 years to another hospital room, another scared child watching someone fight for life. That's Mr. Henderson, Victoria said softly, noticing Nathan's frozen expression. He's been here 3 weeks. His granddaughter Emma drives 2 hours every day to sit with him. She just graduated college and starts her first teaching job next month. Nathan's throat tightened. He had built his empire by viewing people as numbers, obstacles to overcome or resources to utilize. But seeing Emma's tear-streaked face, hearing her gentle words to her grandfather, something cracked inside his carefully constructed armor. What does he need? Nathan asked, his voice rougher than usual. Steady power to his ventilator. If that machine stops for more than 4 minutes, we'll lose him. Nathan rolled up his sleeves and began helping his technicians install a dedicated generator line directly to Mr. Henderson's room. His expensive watch caught on a cable, and without hesitation, he unstrapped it and tossed it aside. Victoria watched in amazement as the man worth $4 billion crawled under hospital beds, running power cables with dirt under his fingernails. "You don't have to do this yourself," Victoria told him during a brief break. "Your team can handle the technical work." Nathan wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a smudge of grease. "When I was 8, I spent 3 months in a place like this. County hospital, understaffed, underfunded. I watched a man in the next bed die when their backup generator failed during a storm." The nurses cried. "I promised myself I'd never be powerless again." Victoria felt her perception of him shifting like sand. "Is that why you became so successful?" "Success was supposed to be armor," Nathan said quietly. "But armor only works if you never take it off. Tonight, looking at these people, your patients. I realize I've been wearing it so long I forgot what I was protecting." The lights flickered ominously. Both of them rushed back to work. They moved through the hospital like a well-coordinated team. Victoria's knowledge of every patient's needs perfectly complementing Nathan's resources and determination. In the NICU, they installed battery backups for 7 tiny incubators. In the cardiac unit, they ensured continuous power for life-saving monitors. Around 3 a.m., as they worked to stabilize power to the dialysis unit, Nathan's phone rang constantly with urgent calls from his company. A major deal was falling through. Stock prices were fluctuating. Board members were demanding his immediate attention. "You should take those calls," Victoria said. Seeing his jaw clench with each ring, Nathan looked at her, then at Mrs. Rodriguez in bed 12, whose daughter was asleep in the bedside chair after driving through the hurricane to be there. He turned off his phone completely. "They can wait," he said simply. Victoria felt something warm spread through her chest. She had spent years watching people choose money over compassion, convenience over commitment. Seeing Nathan Cross, one of the most powerful men in America, choose to stay in a struggling hospital instead of managing his empire, changed everything she thought she knew about him. As dawn approached, they found themselves in the hospital's small break room, sharing vending machine coffee that tasted like it had been made with hurricane water. Both were exhausted, dirty, and emotionally drained. But every patient was stable, every machine was running. "Why do you do this job?" Nathan asked suddenly. "You could make 3 times your salary in the private sector." Victoria wrapped her hands around the warm cup, thinking of how to explain something she'd never put into words. "My brother was born with a heart defect. We spent months in hospitals when I was 12. I watched my parents struggle with medical bills, fight with insurance companies, sleep in waiting room chairs. But I also saw nurses who remembered my name, doctors who explained things in Spanish for my mom, janitors who brought my dad coffee during the long nights." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "They taught me that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about dignity. It's about making sure that when someone is at their most vulnerable, they're treated like they matter. Every patient in this building has someone who loves them, someone who's praying they'll be okay. How could I do anything else?" Nathan stared into his coffee, seeing his own reflection in the dark surface. "I spent so many years building walls to keep people out. I forgot that walls also keep you in." "Walls can be torn down," Victoria said softly. Their eyes met across the small table. And for a moment, the storm outside seemed too quiet. Nathan saw not just the dedicated coordinator who had worked tirelessly through the night, but the woman who had grown up translating for her parents, who chose compassion over comfort, who knew every patient's story by heart. Victoria saw not the ruthless businessman from magazine covers, but the 8-year-old boy who had made a promise in a hospital bed, the man who had just spent 8 hours choosing people over profit. "The storm's passing," Nathan said, though he made no move to leave. "Some storms leave things better than they found them," Victoria replied. As the first rays of sunlight broke through the clouds, filtering through the break room window, both of them knew that whatever happened next, they had been fundamentally changed. The walls that had protected Nathan for so long had crumbled, not through force, but through witnessing the quiet strength of someone who had never needed walls at all. Outside, Miami began to assess the damage from Hurricane Rebecca. Inside Memorial General, two people discovered that the most powerful transformations happen not in boardrooms or at charity galas, but in the quiet moments when someone chooses to stay, to help, to see others as more than just obstacles or opportunities. The storm was ending, but their story was just beginning. 3 months after Hurricane Rebecca, Memorial General Hospital looked completely different. New generators hummed quietly in a reinforced basement facility. Modern equipment filled every ward. The walls had been repainted, the floors replaced, and state-of-the-art patient monitoring systems connected. Every room to a central command center. Victoria walked through the transformed halls, still amazed by the changes. The Cross Foundation had donated $50 million to the hospital's infrastructure. But more importantly, Nathan had insisted on involving the staff in every decision. No upgrade happened without Victoria's approval. No system was installed without consulting the nurses and doctors who would use it. Daily, Mrs. Chen called Emma Henderson, practically glowing as she approached with a tall young man in a teacher's uniform. "I wanted you to meet my fiancé, David. Grandpa's walking again." Thanks to the new physical therapy equipment, Victoria hugged Emma warmly. Remembering the terrified young woman who had sat by her grandfather's bedside during the storm, Mr. Henderson had not only recovered but had surprised everyone by proposing to his longtime companion during his rehabilitation. Love, it seemed, had been the best medicine of all. "How is he doing?" Victoria asked. "See for yourself," Emma laughed, pointing down the hall where Mr. Henderson was walking slowly but steadily. Using a walker and chatting animatedly with another patient, he waved when he saw Victoria, his face bright with the joy of someone who had been given a second chance. These moments had become common in Victoria's days. Patients who had survived the storm night often stopped by to update her on their recoveries, their families, their lives rebuilt. Each story reminded her why she had chosen this work, why no amount of money could tempt her away from the daily miracle of healing. Her phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "Board meeting running late? Rain check on lunch?" Over the past 3 months, their professional relationship had evolved into something deeper. What had begun as coordination meetings about hospital improvements had gradually become long conversations over coffee, shared meals where they talked about everything except business. Quiet moments that felt like the most natural thing in the world. Victoria had watched Nathan transform as much as the hospital. The man who had once fired employees via email now knew the names of every Cross Foundation staff member and their children. He attended patient advocacy meetings, not as a donor seeking recognition, but as someone genuinely interested in improving healthcare access. Most surprisingly, he had moved from his penthouse to a modest apartment 10 minutes from the hospital, claiming he wanted to be closer to the work that mattered. That evening, Victoria was finishing her shift when she found Nathan in the new memorial garden he had commissioned for families who had lost loved ones. He sat on a bench beneath a tree planted in honor of the patients who hadn't survived Hurricane Rebecca, his suit jacket folded beside him, his tie loosened. "Rough day?" Victoria asked, settling beside him. "The board wants me to run for political office," Nathan said with a tired smile. "They think my hospital hero image would play well in an election." Victoria studied his profile, noting the way his jaw tightened. "But that's not what you want." 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance. More power, more influence, more control. Nathan turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the soft garden lights. "Now I can't imagine spending my time making speeches instead of making sure Mrs. Rodriguez has the dialysis equipment she needs, or that the NICU has enough staff for those premature babies." Victoria felt her heart skip, the way it had been doing more frequently when Nathan looked at her like that, as if she were the most important person in the world. "So what did you tell them?" "I told them I had a better offer." "Oh." Victoria tried to keep her voice casual, though something in Nathan's tone made her pulse quicken. Nathan stood up and walked to the memorial fountain, all his hands in his pockets. "Victoria, you've changed everything about how I see the world. Before that storm, I measured success in dollars and market share. Now I measure it in lives touched, problems solved, people helped. He turned back to her, and Victoria saw vulnerability in his expression that took her breath away. I want to spend the rest of my life learning from you. I want to build something together, not just here at the hospital, but everywhere. A foundation that puts people before profit, that sees potential instead of problems. Victoria stood slowly, her heart pounding. Nathan, what are you saying? I'm saying that the night Hurricane Rebecca hit, I didn't just help save the hospital. You saved me. He took her hands in his voice steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. I'm asking if you'll marry me, Victoria. Not because you need my money or I need your approval, but because together we can do more good than either of us could alone. For a moment, Victoria couldn't speak. She thought of the journey that had brought them here, from that first desperate phone call during the storm to building a foundation that was already changing lives across the country. She thought of Nathan crawling under hospital beds to run power cables, turning off his phone to focus on patients, choosing compassion over profit again and again. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, of course. Yes. Nathan's smile was brighter than all the garden lights combined as he pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, filled with the promise of a future built on the foundation of everything they had learned about love, service, and the courage to tear down walls. A year later, Victoria walked down the aisle of the hospital's new chapel. Past patients who had become friends, staff members who had become family, and community leaders whose lives had been touched by the Crosstune Foundation. Nathan waited at the altar, tears in his eyes, no longer the ruthless businessman who had once measured worth in dollars, but a man who had learned that true wealth came from lifting others up. Their wedding reception was held in Memorial General's new community center, with patients in wheelchairs dancing alongside billionaires, with Emma Henderson catching the bouquet while her grandfather cheered from his front row seat. The cake was cut by two hands that had learned to work together, one carrying the strength of privilege and resources, the other the wisdom of compassion and service. As they swayed to their first dance as husband and wife, Nathan whispered in Victoria's ear, "Thank you for showing me what real power looks like." Victoria smiled, thinking of all the lives they would touch together, all the storms they would weather, all the walls they would help others tear down. Thank you for learning that the strongest foundations are built on love. Outside, Miami sparkled under a clear sky, the city rebuilt and stronger than before. Inside the hospital, patients rested peacefully, their care guaranteed by systems designed with both cutting-edge technology and old-fashioned human kindness. And in the community center, two people who had found each other in the middle of a storm celebrated the beginning of a love story that would change the world. One life at a time. Hurricane Rebecca had torn down buildings and toppled trees, but it had also torn down the walls around a billionaire's heart, revealing the man who had always been there, waiting for someone brave enough to help him find his way home.